Hey everyone, it's Linda Steele, and we have a lot of people these days telling their story. Adults who experienced parental alienation as a child and grew up to be an adult to go search for their fathers, and it's like heartwarming, and it gives you a sense of hope and all of these things that are happening. And it's almost like a fairy tale. You go through so much turmoil as a child, and you hope for this just father embracing you with his arms and all of these things. And for a lot of people that happens, and then there's a story that a lot of people don't share, and it's a story where you don't have a happy ending. It's a story where the reality of all of the emotional abuse that a father goes through turns into depression, turns into addiction, turns into a man who is just ultimately lost. Because that's what happens. I see it time and time again. I don't know if you can hear all this stuff around me. I work in a trucking industry. I work around men. I hear these stories on a daily basis. And unfortunately, as a child, I had to live this story. Recently, a woman had shared her story about how she got to reconnect with her father, and it was all these lies that the mother had said and all this stuff. And I cried. It meant everything to me. I remember being that child and having that fantasy and thinking, like, the day's gonna come and I'm gonna get to meet my dad, and it's gonna be all of these beautiful moments that everybody wants to have when they aren't afforded their father. And my story didn't have a happy ending, and that made me want to help men more. When I met my father was a drug addict and an alcoholic and emotional. My God, when he met me, I'm pretty sure he wasn't sober when he went to the airport. My mom had kicked me out because I got in contact with him, and so I took a plane ride the next day to go live with him because that's what my mother's option for me was. And of course, none of it was legal. She just did it off of an emotional compulsion because she was pissed off that, I wanted to know my father. And so, this man suffered for 17 years. And for 17 years, he was basically belittled, told he wasn't important, kept from his children. All of these things. These are long-term emotional abuse of these men, and there's real consequences for that. His consequence was he turned to drugs to be able to escape the everyday pain. He turned to alcohol to try to escape the everyday pain. He ultimately, I didn't have that happy ending that every alienated child hopes to have. I had a different one. My father became a drug addict. My father was severely depressed. My father was numb to the world. My father was in disbelief of the love that his child who came to find him could have for him, because any thoughts of me possibly leaving again just turned to anger, just turned to an emotional depression. It was another 6-pack or another 12-pack that day because, we weren't getting along. He had addictions and I wanted to join the military, and, he knew his lifestyle wasn't okay for me. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the healing that needs to happen for these men, this disregard. Everybody wants to see the father who failed, right? But nobody wants to see the system that failed that father. Everybody wants to point the finger at the consequences of what these men live in: depression and addiction and suicide and all this stuff. But nobody wants to see the consequences of their own actions that led to those choices. Now, he continued to have those choices. I'm not saying that's not all on him, But the system that condoned the behavior in order to completely deplete a man down is something that needs to be exposed, you know. And I think because of the things that I went through in my life, I just developed compassion, perception, accountability. You know, I quit blaming everybody around me. You know, I started looking at the reality of things. Drug addiction is a consequence. You know, suicide is a consequence. Depression is a consequence. These aren't just things people wake up and say, today I'm going to smoke meth. You know, a lot of times people are led to that because of depression. A lot of times people are led to that, you know, because of less than fortunate situations. Consequently, I have a sister who's been a drug addict for 11 years, you know, because of the depression she experienced as a child, of being alienated from her family and having a high severe of stress in our home as children, because, you know, we had a mother who was overworked, overstressed, and couldn't deal with the consequences of the reality she created by alienating her and her children from an entire amount of family that could have loved us. So anyways, I'm trying to develop these programs to help teach parents how to heal, you know, because we don't need any more dads slipping away. We don't need any more moms, you know, able to be forgiven for their choices, but yet sit there to point fingers and to damn these men. It's not fair. It's not right. You know, I wished for so long that my story had, you know, a happy ending. My story was filled with the father who embraced me with his hugs and love and everything else, and unfortunately mine wasn't. My story is of the reality of a man who was depleted down to nothing. By the time his daughter was able to find him, he was too far gone. And I will never get that back, you know? And that carries on to my children. My children will never get that. And I just wanted to share that with you today. We quit having compassion. We quit having empathy. We just cared to blame, to point fingers, to say who was worse than who. You know, but at the end of the day, the reality is we have to take accountability for the actions we cause. And my father's died now. He actually he died from his addictions about 5 years ago. And when I see these stories of these other adults, right, who got to have that happy ending with their alienated father, and I could only wish and hope so bad that that could have been my story. It can't. It wasn't. But I can pay this forward. I can take this pain that I have from the broken that I came from and be able to help maybe another dad out there who's struggling with depression, who's struggling with addiction, at the loss of their children, at the loss of, you know, humanity. And that's why I want to create these programs, is to try to help these parents who are just being damned and accused, when in reality there's a lot more accountability that needs to go around this table. So anyways, I'm going to leave you with that message today, and I will talk to you later. Linda Steele, bye.